Present.
Commissioner Kehoe.
Here.
Commissioner Tavalloni.
Here.
Commissioner Van Kneinenberg.
Here.
Chair Inman.
Here.
Senator Bell. Assemblymember Frazier. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Perfect. Let's get to work. So we're going to start today on item number 18. So, Paul?
Commissioners, tab 18 is an information item. Clark Paulson will present an update on budget and allocation capacity.
There we go. Good morning, Commissioners. I want to commend the chair for a remarkable game of hopscotch yesterday. That was impressive.
I'm supposed to be playing football now, go Rams.
Wrong sport. So I wanted to report on the status of our allocation capacity through the December meeting. My wife is the mathematician, but she could guide me to say we're halfway through the fiscal year, and we're at 52% in terms of our allocation, so we're just about where we should be. That reflects a total capacity of $6.9 billion, of which we've allocated $3.6 billion. So this is a happy news and a proper reporting of where we stand as it relates to allocation capacity. I'm also coming with our report on the G12 delegation. The G12 resolution is the means by which the Commission has delegated to Caltrans the ability to adjust project budgets within certain limits. And we report to you on how we've acted on that delegation. Through December of this fiscal year, we have adjusted budgets for the shop to the tune of about $55.5 million in reductions. For the STIP, about $3 million in increases for a net of about $52 million in decreases. A lot of that coming at the time of contract award. And on January 10th, Governor Newsom, in his first budget, presented the governor's budget for fiscal year 1920. The budget proposed allows for $14.6 billion for Caltrans programs and operations. That's about $408 million increase. The position increase is about 355 positions. Virtually all of that are what we refer to affectionately as orange shirts, some of which you saw yesterday. So these are field maintenance staff that have increased in order to meet SB1 requirements. We have some adjustments in the categories of the budget, and those adjustments really have to do with the maturing of SB1 programs as we have programs of projects and have a more refined sense of where those programs are going. And it also reflects the development of shop projects and the anticipation that they will be coming forward in a greater volume during the coming fiscal year. There are a couple of adjustments through budget change proposals for fiscal year 1920 that we brought forward. One is a baselining of the project initiation document, the PID funding. That's something we baseline every 2 years based on workload, and our proposal is that we maintain the current staffing level for PID development and have a small increase as it relates to contracted workload for PID development. I made reference to the funding for maintenance staff coming from SB1 resources. And then there's a technical budget change proposal. We propose eliminating a couple of funds which have, at this point, have very minimal activity. So close those for efficiency purposes, and then realigning some funding to match the functional location of the management of that work. I wanted to mention to you, and this has been alluded to, I think, previously, that the governor's proposal talked about the development of a statewide policy and approach as it relates to the use of airspace for homeless facilities. And I think you are aware that there have been a few bills involving a few jurisdictions for this point, and the governor talked about having a statewide, more broad proposal or approach, and there has been legislation introduced to that effect. I bring that to your attention since you have a role in approving leases for airspace to local agencies as they come forward. The budget will continue. There will be hearings on budget in the next few months. The governor will release May revision, and then in June, if everything goes as expected, the budget will be adopted. And I think I've really addressed the upcoming events. In April, we'll release our transportation funding, our financing package, including the Chart C. Any questions on the capacity and budget information?
Commissioner Cometti?
On that airspace proposal, who's preparing that? Can you give me a little more background on that?
Sure. So as I understand it, the Department of General Services has the lead for the state, and this the question about state property and its usefulness in housing and meeting homeless needs is something that the governor has asked General Services to lead for the state as a whole, and Caltrans will participate as it relates to our property and most particularly our airspace.
But is someone preparing a homeless camp? I mean,
Oh, I'm sorry. So there have so the legislation that has passed and exists for a few of jurisdictions calls for Caltrans to lease available unused airspace to a local government who would put in some sort of location to provide services to the homeless. My understanding is it's not to house the homeless, but to provide them services and direct them to resources.
that'll be done on a case-by-case basis, and the department's just responsible for leasing them the airspace.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Clark, I have one for you on the G12 progress report. Given the conversations that we've all had about the tight bidding climate and everything, I guess I was kind of surprised to see 142 projects. I mean, it's great that you had 142 with decreases, but is there, in peeling that onion, can you give us a quick, your opinion of what that might be?
So I might defer that, excuse me, to Mr. Keever, who will be addressing you a little bit later and probably
Okay.
has a much better view.
That's fine. Thank you.
It stands to reason, though, if the bid climate is becoming more difficult, that this pattern might reduce. But I think Mike
No, but I
Keever
think
could
they're
help.
more, I would have expected the pattern to be the other way, where, we've learned that with fewer bidders, the prices tend to go up, and so, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
okay.
should probably defer to someone who
Okay.
can speak much more
That's perfect.
intelligently.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Dunn.
Thanks. Clark, I'm wondering, and maybe for Susan as well, that on the airspace issue, it might be a minor thing, but there's always this tension between providing homelessness services, et cetera, under airspace near freeways, and balancing that out with air quality concerns. I think that it would be wise for us, if we're going to be asked to approve these things for local government, that local government then doesn't get in the crosshairs of presenting projects that the Air Resources Board is going to oppose. So can we coordinate that and maybe hear a little bit more at our next joint meeting on how this can work, particularly in light of the crisis we have in the state on housing and homelessness?
Sure. I think Executive Director Branson is ahead of you. As we talked about this topic, she asked that we meet and talk in more depth about this.
Clark, thanks.
We can do that. Thank you.
Well, especially because those, I'm sure, would fit our definition of disadvantaged communities or whatever label we put on those populations. So, okay, let's move on then. That was information. We'll go now to item 19. Paul.
Commissioners, tab 19 is an information item. Clark Paulson will present an overview of the development process for the 2020 STIP fund estimate.
He's got to speak up.
So the fund estimate process is every 2 years we go through adopting the fund estimate through the commission. So we've begun the process for the development of the 2020 fund estimate. It's a statutorily required exercise, and it's really a very key process and document that ultimately defines what funds are available for the transportation programs in the state. And so this is something that we take very seriously, and it's very critical to get as right as we possibly can. The process includes bringing forward assumptions to be adopted by the commission, and then the final fund estimate. And I'll talk about timeline in a little bit more detail. The statutory requirements call for the commission to adopt the fund estimate by August 15th. And so the process will lead to that date. Fortunately, the commission will be meeting on August 14th. And so that aligns very nicely with the statutory requirement. And then that ultimately leads to the adoption in the following year by April 1st of the STIP program. The fund estimate covers a 5-year period, and it looks at resources and commitments during this 5-year period. We always consider the very first or base year while we are developing the fund estimate. So you can see in this slide the pattern of the 5 years and the renewal each 2 years of the estimates for the fund estimate. As we come forward for the 2020 fund estimate, we'll be addressing the year, fiscal year 1920, which is when it will be adopted, and then the fiscal years through fiscal year 24-25. So the exercise calls for us to adopt assumptions about revenue flow during that period. We don't anticipate by law we are not allowed to anticipate any changes in law related to revenue structure either on the state or federal side. We also go through the process based on current budgetary commitments for estimating the costs and expenses of the department and the programs. This is a very simple look at the math related to the fund estimate. We begin by identifying the cash that's available for transportation purposes. We rely heavily on Department of Finance forecasts as it relates to anticipated revenues. And then we look at the projected costs, expenditures of the department for its administration, local assistance, shop, maintenance, and operations. And we look at the program of projects up to that point that have been programmed. That ultimately leads to the important bottom line of what's available for shop and STIP programs. So these are the key dates aligning with the upcoming commission meetings. At the next meeting in March, we will bring forward our assumptions for your input. We work very closely with commission staff on these assumptions. And the assumptions are really probably the driver and the key point. We make assumptions about what the fuel consumption will be, what the rates will be, and other factors that impact what funds are available. In May, after receiving input from the commission, the assumptions will be adopted. In June, we come with a draft of the fund estimate to get input from the commission. In August, as I mentioned, before the statutory deadline, we adopt the fund estimate. And that's the conclusion. Any questions?
Commissioner.
I just want to thank you, Clark, for your presentation. It's very clear and concise, and you do a good job of stepping in from your former Mr. Stephen Keck, who's also done a great job. I just, for the benefit of the commission...
He's watching me. He's watching.
It's just been a pleasure to work with you, and even though this is my last day here on the commission, I know it won't be my last day seeing you and associating with you. Clark and I have been friends for almost 20 years and almost neighbors. We both live in Roseville. But it's great to have you on board and coming to our meetings every month.
I want to thank you for your service, and I'm grateful that you didn't run me down on the way here this morning on Blue Oaks Boulevard. Thank you.
Commissioner Van Kenynenberg.
Thank you for the presentation. If we could go to the last slide, one thing that's, in my opinion, that's missing in this discussion is, with specific to the STIP and the ITIP, there's another guiding document in the ITIP that I think needs to be revisited. The ITSP this commission operated under the ITSP from 1998 for many years. When in 2015 there was an updated ITSP adopted, and that was crafted under a time where we were constricted on funds, and we had to, there was STIPs that were programmed that were deprogrammed because of a lack of funds. And so it went from many corridors being in the ITSP down to just 11. And then we passed SB1, and people who were deprogrammed in that went back and said, okay, hey, we're back programmed again. And the example I have here is a letter I got from Norma Ortega when there was some money that was freed up and we were trying to reprogram some money in a rural county, this happened to be Tuolumne County. Oh, by the way, the ITSP is no longer applicable to this state route. Even though it's a critical state route for goods and service for a rural county. And this is played out over and over again through many rural counties in California. So I would appreciate the state agency coming back with a look at the ITSP under the new circumstances that we live in 2019, as opposed to the circumstances we were in 2015. I think the document was great for the time we were in because we were constricted on funds, but it seems not strategic to revisit that as we go into 2020.
Sure. So I had the chance to talk with our planning division, and they, I think, acknowledge the need and told me that they're in the process of initiating the update to the ITSP. So I think there's certainly opportunity for commission staff and the commission to provide.
Greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Clark.
Thank you.
Okay, if my math is right, I'm now going to skip to item 23. Christine.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Tab 23 is an action item to amend the 2019 Local Partnership Formulaic Program of Projects. The 2019 Local Partnership Formulaic Program is funded from $100 million annually in state funds authorized by Senate Bill 1 that are appropriated from the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account for fiscal year 2019-20. Only agencies with commission-adopted shares and committed local matching funds are eligible to receive funding. Specifically, this amendment will program one new project, the Montague Expressway Pedestrian Overcrossing, nominated by the Santa Clara County Valley Transportation Authority for their available formulaic program shares of $4,497,000 in fiscal year 2019-20. This project would provide a safe and convenient, elevated and enclosed pedestrian, bicycle, and Americans with Disabilities Act connection between Milpitas BART Station and destinations north of Montague Expressway. This item is consistent. This amendment will result in a new total of 34 projects for 23 agencies, a total programmed amount of $77.2 million for fiscal year 2019-20. The remaining $27.8 million can be programmed through June 30th, 2021. This item is consistent with the Local Partnership Program guidelines and the adopted formulaic program. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of tab 23 as presented in the staff recommendation.
Move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gardino, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item 24.
Commissioners, Amy Bailey from the Caltrans Division of Environmental Analysis will be providing an update on their plans to implement an advanced mitigation program. As you may recall, SB1 dedicated $30 million annually from the state highway account for a total of 4 years and created the advanced mitigation account that is intended to be self-sustaining. At our August meeting, Amy provided you with an overview on the progress they had made to develop an advanced mitigation program and to discuss their first version of the draft guidelines to implement this program. Caltrans has since revised these guidelines, at which Amy will provide you an update on today. Caltrans staff is aware of 4 comment letters that were recently sent to Caltrans on the second iteration of these draft guidelines. A common theme in these comment letters is that Caltrans should partner with regional agencies where possible to coordinate the use of both regional and state advanced mitigation funds. This is this as identified as an action item, and the reason being is if you would care to would like to have staff follow up on any actions such as preparing a comment letter, we will be able to do so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Great. Thank you, Garth. Good morning, Commissioners, Director Berman, Undersecretary Inouye. Thank you for having me here for this update. As Garth mentioned, since we presented the informal draft guidelines back in June and again in August for discussion, we've done quite a bit of outreach and gotten a lot of feedback from various parties. So today I'll go over a little bit about the comments we've received and updates to the draft formal guidelines that we've posted. So the draft formal guidelines include a discussion about funding for the advanced mitigation program, the planning process we anticipate undertaking, the programming process, including program of a schedule for programming. It includes agency coordination with resource agencies, transportation agencies, and tribes specifically. It also has a coordination section that's added with respect to stakeholders and the public. We go over the advanced mitigation project delivery process, and we have a section related to credit tracking. There's reporting requirements to the legislature that are also included in there. And we have communication plan for the strategies we'll take to communicate about the program. We also have a section on risk management, and we did add a section for efficiencies, as it's seen that this program can contribute to the SB1 $100 million for efficiencies. As Garth mentioned, we previously presented in the informal guidelines in June. Since then, we've received specific feedback from both Garth and Laura Pennebaker, as well as Chair Inman in the form of a letter, as well as the other stakeholders that provided feedback, and we feel that this really benefited the guidelines overall. We transmitted the draft formal guidelines to the legislature in November, and we posted it to our website and informed the stakeholders on our distribution list. We held 2 workshops in January, one in Sacramento on January 14th, and one in Los Angeles on January 16th. We received input on the informal draft guidelines from the Commission, agency, Orange County Transportation Authority, Rural Counties Task Force, High Speed Rail Authority, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Nature Conservancy. In the middle there of the slide, I have a summary of the major comments that we received. There was interest in including a Mitigation 101 or more of a background section on the history of advanced mitigation and what it is. There was an interest to clarify the various resource agencies' authorities and the laws in which we're going to be seeking advanced mitigation related to. There was an interest to clarify how program credits will be administered, delivered, and tracked. There was interest in clarifying roles of transportation and resource agencies, clarifying the use of advanced mitigation by other transportation agencies, and providing greater detail about project planning, programming, and delivery processes. We also added a section about more agency coordination. We are in the process of negotiating an agreement with all of the resource agencies on how we will operate and have touch points with them to engage them in the planning process as well as the advanced mitigation project delivery process to make sure we're complying with their various regulations and setting up the advanced mitigation to meet the ultimate permitting needs. There was an interest to provide greater detail about communication tools and opportunities for engagement from the public and the stakeholders. There was a specific request by the Commission to change the reporting month to August annually as opposed to October, so we've accommodated that. And then we've addressed that we will be tracking any guideline revisions in a revision log as part of the guidelines. There was also various comments about pilot projects and an interest to include pilot projects as part of the program. We did take this under consideration. However, we do have 12 projects that are currently moving forward that were previously programmed in the 2016 SHOP that are advanced mitigation projects, so we are in the process of implementing those. We do see those as pilot efforts, and we are learning a lot as we move through the various stages of project delivery on those advanced mitigation projects. So to address these comments, we did add the history section and more of a specific definition of compensatory mitigation, as well as the agency authorities for mitigation and the laws that require mitigation. We also included a little bit of a background history on where we've come with advanced mitigation over the years. We did add more detail about the minimum annual programming and the program schedule. As I mentioned, the CTC August report will now be in August as opposed to October. We did clarify engaging local project data requests regarding planned STIP projects, so we can have those in the inclusion of the Regional Advanced Mitigation Needs Assessment to guide investments. We added more specifics related to coordination. We have a section about coordination with transportation agencies related to that data I just mentioned for STIP projects, as well as notification of credit availability and use and tracking. We did provide an opportunity to review the planning level document for agency partners, Native American tribes, local transportation agencies, local advanced mitigation programs, conservation organizations, and the public. So we're viewing this Regional Advanced Mitigation Needs Assessment Planning document as an opportunity to collaborate with stakeholders, get feedback on information specific to that region, and make sure that we're aligning conservation priorities as well with the transportation needs. And as I mentioned, we added a communication tools and opportunities section to elaborate on those engagement opportunities. The efficiencies section does talk about the anticipated efficiencies that this program may realize, and we will be working with Jim Davis on including those efficiencies in the SB1 efficiencies report. So we've been doing various outreach since June. We've coordinated with the Assembly Bill 1282 work group, which is the permit streamlining group, to get feedback on the informal draft guidelines, as well as just discuss various updates to the program. We have resource agency monthly coordination meetings. During those meetings, we can discuss kind of troubleshooting the process, as well as the process agreement that I mentioned that we're negotiating. We've done several resource agency management briefings on the program, as well as on the process agreement, to get us prepared for moving that forward. We've attended regional transportation agency meetings. The Rural County Task Force had us to do a presentation. We have been engaged both at the program level and on regional conservation investment strategies, both in the Bay Area as well as Sacramento. And we have also been included in the Bay Area Advanced Mitigation Planning effort. There's also a Santa Cruz County Advanced Mitigation MOU that Caltrans is a signatory to, and we participate in those meetings and have presented on the program there. And then we have just been seeking to present at various conferences and partner meetings as we can. We also have established a website that has a lot of information now on the program. There's a fact sheet, there's an FAQ, the guidelines are posted there, the workshops have been recorded and are posted there, and we will continue to add information about the program as we proceed. As I mentioned, we had the workshops, we had great attendance. We had 64 people in person, and we had 82 people online as it was streamed live, and we took questions over the web. There were various people represented at these workshops, transportation agencies, consultants, land trusts, utility representatives, mitigation bankers, resource agency partners, and nonprofit entities, and even universities came too. So we had a really good dialogue. A lot of really great questions were asked and answered at those. If you have interest, they are posted on the website. You can view and hear some of the questions. So right now, we have been receiving comments, and we're digesting those. We will seek to look at those comments and evaluate whether or not we need to make revisions to the guidelines, and then we will seek to publish the final formal guidelines. I put February, March here. It may depend on the comments that we receive and how we proceed with addressing them. So thank you for this forum, for presenting. If you have any questions.
Okay, question. Commissioner Van Kynenberg.
Thank you. This is great. I think sense of the commission is it's great what we're doing. I've gotten the letters from local agencies about this issue of partnering. In your opinion, do you think their concerns have been addressed at this point?
I think that we're getting going on the program. In the guidelines, we've have the role of the districts to do most of the partnering with the regional transportation planning entities as we determine where we're going to do the planning. So it's coming, I think, in terms of more outreach. We have tried to establish a meeting coming up in March for the other advanced mitigation programs to do a lessons learned kind of dialogue and to talk about coordination with those specific regions. And so I think it's forthcoming. And I think some of the concerns about the STIP information, we are going to need to coordinate on and figure out the best approach.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand what you said. What you're saying is not yet, but you're working on it. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely.
Okay. I think let's just keep the spirit in that we're all on the same team, mm-hmm. that a lot of our local agencies take care of a lot of lane miles, and they're on the same team as our state agencies that take care of other lane miles. Mm-hmm. So we're all on the same team.
Definitely.
So let's just keep that attitude as we go forward.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you also for the presentation. I appreciate this, and I'm very, very interested in this for a number of reasons, not only to meet or exceed the environmental benefits that can accrue from good advanced mitigation, but also advancing project delivery, expediting project delivery. I think that's one of the really important things to show that economy and environment can work together. and you don't have to give up one for the other, but under SB1, I'm looking for anything to be able to share with the public and tout Caltrans' good work in this regard. And just as my colleague shared, there is already a baseline of good work done at the local level upon which this program was inspired to work. So looking, the last thing I want is that everybody's got different standards for mitigation. So taking a look at those and making sure that we're aligning, and it does result in good environmental protection and expediting projects, because we already see it done. Just my thought that I really want this to succeed and succeed well. Are you already starting to think about what projects might be up for this funding and could benefit when the guidelines are released?
No. Once the guidelines are finalized, we're going to be stepping through that planning process we've outlined in the guidelines. And so we're seeking to hone in on the geographic areas for the planning efforts. And so that will really kick off, where are we going to be doing the planning, looking at some of the information specific to those transportation needs you mentioned, evaluate the anticipated mitigation needs, and then align the conservation strategies or priorities that have been identified in those areas and that we will coordinate with our resource agency partners on. That planning document will serve as a baseline information for both the transportation mitigation needs as well as the conservation priorities, and will seek to provide enough information to the districts when scoping an advanced mitigation project. Mm-hmm. So that will be, that's how our process is laid out.
Okay, so I guess the practical side is our agencies, departments, projects already thinking about how to take advantage of this fund? Are you already hearing from folks, or is it too early?
I think it's a little bit too early because we need to get out there with what our needs are related to the mitigation, making sure that we're tying the advanced mitigation project scope to meet those needs. And it's going to be an interesting juxtaposition of the transportation needs, the regulatory context, and then the conservation interests for an area. And then from that information, the districts will scope a project that will meet the needs and align with the conservation objectives.
So when you then, on your slide, when you did outreach to the resource agencies, is there an informal agreement that they're going to work with you? Are you working on, does every project, it's kind of like herding cats, right? You've got every project has different mitigation requirements. So I get that. How do you then, what's the arrangement with the resource agencies to work in a collaborative way to expedite project delivery and maximize resource protection without piling on? Do you understand what I'm saying? How does that process work in your mind?
That's a really good question, and I mentioned the process agreement we're seeking to negotiate with the resource agencies, that it would not be an informal setup, it would be a formal agreement that does align with the planning process that we've outlined in the guidelines. They would review the planning document, make sure that we're including all the best science and planning information that they have and would like to identify to make sure that our mitigation's kind of focused in those directions. It will also include a list of projects that we anticipate would benefit from the mitigation developed, so they'll be put on notice that they're evaluating that. There's some limitations with them being pre-decisional, so as we step through the process with the advanced mitigation projects, we're going to be utilizing their various regulations and banking instruments and following those regulations and having separate agreements that codify what that advanced mitigation project builds, what resource type it can be utilized for, and the service area of application, so that when those future transportation projects come on board and we're negotiating permits, we can say, these are the mitigation requirements specific to that transportation project, and we have developed advanced mitigation that should meet those requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask Director Berman. Chair Frazier wanted us to get to this yesterday, and we didn't, so he left us a written statement. So Susan, if you'll read that.
Commissioners, Assembly Chair Frazier has a question. SB1 and the budget trailer bill were clear that the advanced mitigation program was to support mitigation needs for both Caltrans SHOP projects and the region's STIP projects. The draft guidelines are designed to focus on Caltrans's needs first, and the regions seem to be an afterthought. Can you restructure the draft guidelines so that the regions are participating on par with Caltrans in the beginning of the planning and project development process, enabling coordination, collaboration, and resulting in partnership projects?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think we can consider it. I think there may be some things that we need to think about from a technical nature that might be a longer conversation with respect to the use of the model. I think he's referring to the statewide advanced mitigation needs assessment model, currently being focused on the SHOP projects. We fully understand there's a need to consider STIP needs as well to inform the program needs and the investments. As we're evaluating the non-SHOP projects inclusion in the model, there was a lot of uncertainty as to which non-SHOP projects will be selected as priority candidates and approved for funding with STIP dollars. So there was some concern about the inclusion in the selection of the assessment areas, because then if we make the investments there and the project doesn't come to fruition, then we may be stuck. So there was the decision to help manage these risks to make the selections for the regions based on the SHOP projects, which have greater certainty of moving forward, and therefore greater likelihood that the mitigation that gets developed would be used. And therefore, we gave these considerations and risks, and it was determined that our approach for including non-SHOP or anticipated STIP shops in the regional advanced mitigation needs assessment would be the appropriate place to pull them in. So that's how we've outlined it currently.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe we'll trust that you'll circle back and get the questioner's
I think that
question.
there's maybe an opportunity. I was talking to Kenny yesterday. Maybe there's an opportunity in the guidelines to say, you know, as data and the modeling matures, that we can seek to bring it in earlier. There's a bit of a workload as well as the data availability issue that we'll need to grapple with.
Well, and I see that in conjunction with our coordinated integrated corridors, whatever we're calling them, too, because I really, you know, I look to Senator or Commissioner Kehoe and the work in the north coast of San Diego and that work, and I think a good model for all of us, too. So with that, Kenneth, do you want to come testify, and then we'll come back if there are more questions? Stand by, Amy, don't go.
Sure thing. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Kenneth Cow with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I did want to take the time to thank Amy and her staff for holding the workshops and being receptive to our comments. As she mentioned, we are continuing to talk. MTC did submit a comment letter on these draft guidelines, and we do have the same concern about the STIP not necessarily being at the same footing as the SHOP, and we're continuing to work through that. I also wanted to mention that MTC is starting our own regional advanced mitigation program, following the footsteps of Orange County and San Diego, who also have their own programs. And we look forward to partnering with the state to leverage both programs into something with that can achieve even greater outcomes. So thank you very much.
Other questions from my commissioners?
So this is listed on our agenda as an action item, but on the tab, it said it was an information item. Would it be appropriate for our staff to craft a letter, or is it is staff requesting that they just continue what they've been doing?
Commissioners, if we can capture the comments that were made here today and formulate those comments into a letter and transmit that over to Caltrans.
Thank you.
Okay. And so that would require, if you want to make a motion on that, this isn't listed as an action item on your agenda. We did not bring forward a action for you, but if you want to make an action and direct us to do that, that's fine too. It's your call. Either way, we'll do it.
Well, I think that there's a lot of good comments about this started at the local level. It's gone up to Caltrans. It really needs to include the local level. I concur with many of the sentiment that was behind Assemblyman Frazier's letter or comments. So I would move that we craft a letter into this process that would encompass those comments.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Kenenberg, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any further discussion? I have just a couple of things, Amy. One, on this list, I didn't see outreach to the Energy Commission, and several years ago, I worked with Commissioner Douglas on the Desert Renewable Conservation, I forget the exact acronym, so I just want to make sure. And I'm not sure, we worked on that for a couple years, and it may have stalled out, but Commissioner Douglas would probably be another good person to circle with at the Energy Commission. And then a question that I had really comes out of our trip to Paradise, and I mean that devastating impact, but this new world order of wildfires seems that it's going to have some big environmental impacts, especially where we see autos and everything burned in place and stuff. So I don't know how you tap into this task force that the governor set up on the wildfire, but let's make sure that we try to close that loop as well. And then I just want to say that I think you have an opportunity to hit a grand slam. You're going to be the most valuable player from award to get this right. So we're going to be cheering you on. There's a lot of partners. I mean, if we replayed a discussion about the Water Agency, Water Resources Board yesterday, I think your job just got a little bit tougher with the confusion around what footnote 8 might be and how the partnerships that you have and the touch points you have on so many different levels, if your partner's confused, you're confused kind of thing. So I'd say we're cheering you on. So with that, any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to the creative math now, and I believe we're going to start, where do we go, Susan? 27? Okay, we're going to go to the information calendar.
Great. Good morning. Yeah, good.
27.
Good morning,
This is
Commissioners.
new math.
So the next, I'll do the math for you. The next 10 agenda items number 27 through 36 are information items. And please note the changes to item 27 on your pink change sheet. So these items are deemed by staff not to raise any issues, and therefore individual items will not be presented unless specifically requested by a commissioner. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to 51.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. Item 51 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Santa Cruz State Route 1 project in Santa Cruz County. Caltrans adopted a statement of overriding considerations, finding that the benefits outweigh the impacts. Staff recommends your approval.
Well, I've got some chorus going on. I'm going to pick it out as best I can. I heard a motion by Commissioner Gilmetti and a second by Commissioner Gardino. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. 52, Terry.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item number 52 is an action item to amend the wireless program's master license agreement and fee matrix. These changes will remove the definition and rates for wireless small cells. The change was necessary due to a recent ruling by the Federal Communications Commission that directs how fees can be charged. Staff has reviewed the documents and recommends Commission approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining. That motion carries. Thank you, Terry. Okay, 53. Chris.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Again, item 53 is an information item on the project delivery quarterly report for the first quarter of fiscal year 2018-2019. Government code requires the department to report to the Commission quarterly for projects that have completed construction in the previous quarter. The report contains information on the approved capital and support budgets compared to expenditures at contract construction acceptance for all major state highway operation and protection program projects. So Mike Keever from the department will be presenting highlights from the report to the Commission today, and this might be our opportunity also to get the question that Clark Paulson deferred as well.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
So this is the first quarter delivery report. I also wanted to mention to you that in reviewing the report, we want to try to see if we can make the report more concise and understandable. And so we're starting to go through the process of reviewing that report, better integrating it with all of our reporting with regard to SB1. So you may have recalled that when Jim Davis has come up, we've talked about how we're overlapping each other, so we're working on that to see if we can find ways to report at a high level to you in a more concise and easily understood way. If you have any input on that, feel free to come back, through your Commission staff, and we'll be working with them in the future. So just briefly, a couple of slides to help you understand what I'm reporting on. We do come to you phase by phase, and we'll be reporting to you on how we're doing through each of these phases in our delivery report. Currently, we have over 3,000 active projects valued about $13 billion. So just again to remind you that you only see a small subset of the overall program that we bring before you. And what we're trying to do is, when we initiate our PIDs, that's sort of our initial ballpark start, but we have a great deal of uncertainty, and in going phase to phase, we're working to reduce that uncertainty and risk and right-size all of these projects, these hundreds, thousands of projects, and try to get them right-sized before we go to the construction phase, which is where the most significant portion of the dollars are expended. And because we don't want to tie up the dollars with all of the what-ifs of the risks, we monitor those risks, we report those risks to you through the watch list, which is included in this quarterly report. And then we make adjustments from phase to phase and adjust our programming. If we're in the delivery year, we do that adjustment through a greater than 120. And I just wanted to remind the Commission, we're trying to encourage our staff to not fear the change, to come to you, be transparent and accountable, but try to get ahead of these projects. And I mentioned at the workshop that we seem to be getting ahead of our supplementals to award, and we're getting closer to making our adjustments as that pipeline of projects is getting cleared out. So with regard to how we're doing, so this is the first quarter, and you may notice one at the beginning of the fiscal year, we're managing our risks, and we believe we're going to ultimately prevail in mitigating, avoiding, monitoring, and being successful in addressing those risks. The other thing that happens, the first quarter tends to be a lighter quarter because, frankly, we try to be as aggressive as we can and take risks and ask our staff to deliver in the fourth quarter of the previous fiscal year if we can. So when it's close, we tend to err on let's be aggressive and let's try to deliver. And so our fourth quarter delivery tends to be rather high. And as a result, the first quarter delivery is lighter. So it's not a constant pace. But right now, overall, things seem to be going according to plan, whether we're looking at the draft environmental documents, the project approval phase, the zero phase, and getting our contracts ready and out to construction. We had planned for 15 projects to go out. We actually have 19, but as you can see, we have 263 that we need to deliver this year. So the bulk of our workload is ahead of us. We're also tracking the project costs at the end of construction, and maybe, Chairman, this is where I can try to answer the question you had with regard to the G12. So we are seeing that we're under budget, and so even though, as we talked about at the workshop, the bids are coming in higher than we had anticipated, particularly at the beginning of the fiscal year, but the savings in the use of the G12 occurs through all of the phases of the delivery process, all the way through to closeout. And so even though that particular phase, we found ourselves behind and finding that our bids were higher than our engineer's estimate, and we're making the correction as we talked about at the workshop the day before yesterday, overall, we're still coming in under budget, providing that savings, and so you see the net positive that Clark talked about in his budget report. So currently, we only have 5 STIP projects. We are running a little bit ahead on that program, ahead meaning we've expended more than we've budgeted. The SHOP program, many more projects, and right now, we're running about what we did last year. So it was 90% last year, this year about 89% through the first quarter. I mentioned that we look to manage our risks, and so currently we have identified about $177 million of risk. And again, keep in mind the size of the program. So just in the construction phase, so you can look at the construction and the closeout, I suppose, almost 800 projects worth $8.5 billion. And so we're talking about a very small subset of the overall program that have significant dollar risks. And even most of these will not come to fruition. But this is the exposure that we see with the very highest risks that are in the on the watch list included in the quarterly report. And just to give you a sense of that, of how many actually come to fruition. So we know the supplementals to award. It's still a small subset of our projects, so about 2.5% in terms of dollars. In terms of projects, it's let's see, it's 4 of the 58 so far. So both in terms of dollars and in terms of the number of projects that we're seeing supplementals toward, it's a small amount, but it's about 50% higher than we saw last year. So you do see the trend that we talked about at the workshop, where we are having to do more supplementals to award. If we stay according to schedule, soon we'll be talking about those with the projects we're bringing before you. But you may recall some of the previous commission meetings, we've had a much greater number of supplementals to award and greater than 120s. So I think we're starting to see a reflection of the adjustment that we're making, but we're certainly trying to encourage our staff, the estimators, the districts, to come in and be proactive and do greater than 120s to make the adjustment that reflects the change in the bidding environment. prior to going out to bid. And so you still may continue to see those going ahead. For the contracts completing construction, last quarter we only had one supplemental to complete construction, and those are running at about the same rate, very, very small rate in terms of dollars and the number of projects that we need. Again, by the time we close out, we're running at about 90% of our budget, so you would anticipate there wouldn't be as many. And I think that's a reflection, again, of we are driving down that risk and uncertainty by the time we get to construction. And so, again, during that time that we have the greatest exposure from a capital standpoint, we're generally staying within our scope and our funding that's available to complete those projects, within our authority. So that completes my, my presentation. If you have any questions.
Commissioner Gometti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, and this may be a dumb question, but on slide 4, where you have annual goals, why aren't they all 100%? I don't understand the goal of only reaching 80% for draft environmental documents and 90% for project approval environmental documents.
So I suppose it's a matter of, so yes, our ultimate goal is 100%.
Why don't we put it down?
Achievable goals, I suppose, recognizing the risk. The risk is higher. So if you look at our historic,
I get that, but it's kind of a phony scorecard when when you're saying you're only going to get 80% of your goal. The goal should be 100% all the time.
so I don't want this to sound as a flippant response, but I used to play basketball. I would want to make every free throw I could, right, when I get up to that line. The reality is I wasn't going to, but could I get to 80%? Maybe. I think looking back historically,
let's
that's the
use your
basis for it.
basketball analogy. That's why they say the guy's an 80% free throw shooter, okay? Because they measure against 100%. Everything has to be measured against 100% so that you can tell whether the guy's a good free throw shooter or he's a crappy free throw shooter. And so, I have trouble with setting that as a goal. The goal should always be 100% so you can measure yourself in the environmental field. Does that make sense?
Certainly it does. And again, our goal is to deliver on all of our milestones. I think, again, looking back at our historic, we're trying to push the bar up to reach to that 100% ultimately, but knowing where we've been in the past, I understand your comment and the basis for the comment. We certainly want to achieve the 100%.
Well, maybe that's you just touched on what is benchmarking yourself to what historically has been. Maybe you can say for the last 7 years, we've averaged delivery at 85% on this, but, obviously the goal being, I don't know what where the Venn diagram overlaps between this argument, but I think you've touched on it, is recognizing what your historic benchmark, what you've historically achieved, and always trying to exceed what improve on what you've historically achieved.
In the report, there is a fiscal year comparison, and maybe there's a way to, we'll look at this, restructure this report to provide this more of a, looking at the historic comparison, but recognizing, yes, we want to deliver on all of our milestones to keep our projects on track and get them delivered as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if your goal is 100%, and last year you achieved 85, okay, so you're trying to get to 90, or you're trying to get to 100, but every year you can find out where you've gone, how you've improved. But it has to be against 100% all the time.
Let's just say that Commissioner Gometti's mom wanted him to get straight A's. And it was still great when he got those B's, but...
Yeah, that didn't happen.
I was trying to get it to something I could relate to. Yes, Commissioner Dunn.
On Mr. Gilmetti's point, I agree. I think the annual goal should always be 100%. So just for example, benchmarking yourself, would you consider a good year 85% of 80%? Do you see what I'm saying? That you achieved 85% of your 80% goal. Do you see how weird that sounds? Mm-hmm. Whereas as opposed to for draft environmental documents, whereas opposed to projects designed 85% of 100% goal, maybe not a bad year. But I'm trying to figure out, how do you measure against 80% if that's your baseline of success?
So I suppose another way to say it is we're grading on the curve, if you will. You always want to get 100% on that test, but where's the A line? What is a reasonable expectation? So when it comes to our contract for delivery, we're saying nothing less than 100% because that's the milestone to get it out to construction. The other milestones with the risk and uncertainty that I talked about earlier, we're trying to recognize that there is greater risk and uncertainty at the beginning of the draft environmental document process. And based on that, when we come out of that PID phase with a very ballparky scope and resource estimate, that we feel that there's a greater risk and that A could go down to an 80%.
And I'm with you. I totally understand that, and I get that. But if you had listed the goal as 100%, and then at the end of the year said, hey, we reached 85% of that 100%, and here's the reasons why: risk, uncertainty, et cetera, that's how normal people would measure success. That's why I'm struggling with, working with Jim on why both of those are not 100%. And we get it that you can't always get there, but that would be, for me, the strive. Otherwise, I'm looking at, okay, so what's a good year? If a successful 100% achievement is 80%, is 85% of 80% success? I don't know how to measure that. It gets into math for me. So anyway, yeah, which would be 64% success, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think you get the gist of the,
I got
of
it.
the comments, so, yeah. Any other discussion? Thank you, Mike. We do appreciate our workshops and everything, and I think we're all better because we're having those. Yeah. And user friendliness is good on the presentations, so. Great. So we're going to move on now to item 54. Chris?
Yes, Commissioners, item 54 is a department action item requesting an initial construction allocation of $30,790,000, which exceeds the programmed amount by more than 20%. This initial construction allocation is based on an updated engineer's estimate. This SHOP project on State Route 20 in Sutter County is a pavement rehabilitation project that will improve 13.5 miles of roadway section by widening the shoulders to 8 feet, providing drainage improvements, and replacing the existing 98-year-old bridge over the Wadsworth Canal. Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request and recommends Commission approval.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dunn, a second by Gilmetti, Commissioner Gilmetti. Is there discussion? Yes.
I just want to point out one more time that because this is being done, this is a Caltrans project, the MOU that's proposed between the Water Board and Caltrans would apply. However, if the Wadsworth Bridge were being done by Sutter County, the MOU would not apply. We are on the same team. The MOU should be consistent across all agencies. So I just want to put that on the record. This is a prime example of why we need to impress upon the Water Board, and I asked the agency and Caltrans to fight for local agencies to be a part of those MOUs.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Item 55, Chris.
Yes, item 55 is a department action item requesting an initial construction allocation of $2,787,000, which exceeds the programmed amount by more than 20%. This initial construction allocation is based on the updated engineer's estimate also. This shop project on Interstate 5 in Los Angeles County near Pyramid Lake will restore function of 2 sections of highway drainage culverts by replacing over 500 feet of asbestos cement pipe with reinforced concrete drainage pipe. Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request also and recommends commission approval.
Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? By abstaining, that motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to item 56. Chris.
Yes, Commissioners, item 56 is a department action item requesting an additional $952,000 in construction capital to award this construction contract on State Route 68 in Monterey County. Caltrans opened bids on the project in October of 2018. 3 contractors submitted bids for this contract. However, the lowest bidder was determined to be non-responsive, and the next lowest bid was 22% higher than the allocated funds. Caltrans discussed the bid results with contractors, including several who opted not to submit bids for this project, and determined the cost of working in a project location with limited staging areas and requirements for the contractor to perform a majority of the work at night impacted the bid costs on this project. Caltrans had anticipated difficulty working in these conditions and increased cost in their engineer's estimate prior to advertisement. However, these changes were not enough to account for recent changes in the bidding environment as well. So Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request and recommends Commission approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gilmetti, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Item 57.
Yes, Commissioners, item 57 is a department action item, and I'd like to point out there were some changes to this. This action is only to re-advertise the contract, not for award. With that, it's a department action item requesting an additional $2,985,000 to re-advertise this contract on U.S. Highway 395 in Mono County. Caltrans opened bids on the project on April 25th, 2018, and after analyzing both bids received by the contractors, decided to reject these bids. The bids were both nearly double the estimated project cost, and Caltrans discussed the bid results with contractors and concluded the following. There were potential conflicts from ongoing projects and other nearby projects scheduled to occur at or near the same location, and this created risks for contractors bidding. The lack of staging areas for construction resulted in long hauls for trucks and created material quality concerns as well with those delayed times. Additionally, the Nevada DOT had several large projects out for the bid at the same time, creating more bid competition in this rural area. Caltrans has addressed all of the above concerns by combining projects, creating a material storage site at Lee Vining, and will perform contractors' outreach events during the advertisement period. Additionally, the adjacent contracts are now completed, so there shouldn't be that competition. So Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request and recommends Commission approval.
Oops, it helps I turn my mic on. A motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Burke. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. We'll move on to item 58, please.
Yes. Item number 58 is a department action item requesting an additional $400,000 in construction capital to complete construction. This shop project is located on State Route 97 in Siskiyou County at the Grass Lake Safety Roadside Rest Area. At the December 2017 Commission meeting, Caltrans received a supplemental allocation request for an additional $905,000, and the contract was awarded in March 2018 for $3,005,000. Currently, the contract is suspended and construction is approximately 94% complete. The primary reason for the cost increases on this project were due to corrective actions taken to fix an existing ramp and portions of a sidewalk that were not included in the original contract to ensure compliance with ADA requirements. Additionally, the delay costs associated with the changes to allow for design modifications were a significant portion of this request. Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request and recommends Commission approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Commissioner Gometti.
Yeah, I'll probably end up voting for this, but I'm a little disappointed that you know, during the engineer's estimate, they didn't pick up the ADA requirements, and nor did they realize they might have to test the soil for diesel contamination. So, you know, I just think it's pretty sloppy.
So we do have Director Moore here. Maybe he could come up and address any questions you may have on this or those concerns.
So Commissioner Dave Moore here, District Director. A couple of the items you mentioned. First off, I want to point out the curb ramp does represent less than 5% of the asks that we're looking here. During the project development process, the project engineer did certify that that ADA ramp met ADA standards, so it was not included as part of the project. However, once the project got out in construction, something looked weird about it. It was measured and checked again, and it did not, in actuality, meet ADA standards. So when it did not meet ADA standards, we're basically forced to deal with that issue at that time. It's unfortunate that it was deemed okay at one point in time, and then later we found out it didn't, but it was something that we had to deal with. In terms of the pavement contamination, because we were looking at a surface treatment of the parking lot, we didn't expect to encounter into the subgrade where we might have contaminated soil. When we did grind off the 2/10 of the pavement in the parking lot, we actually broke through the bottom of the pavement, had a thinner section than we believed, and that's what got us into the soil, and that's what got us into dealing with the diesel contamination. We do core pavement samples out there on our pavement projects. It is a risk-based approach of the costs associated with doing that testing, sending a crew doing that testing versus the surface area that we deal with. This is a very small pavement job. That testing would have been a significant cost associated to the amount of work that's being done out there. So the choice was made not to core it during the design calculated risk. But due to the associated costs with testing and everything, that was a decision that the team made.
What would you do differently? Anything?
There's a couple of things. I mean, actually, a lot of the costs associated with this is we had 50-year-old as-builts on the project, and a lot of the project was designed based on those as-builts. And 50-year-old as-builts, a lot of stuff was not in the same place as what the as-built showed. So more in-depth investigation, but you don't want to tear up a floor to verify where a water pipe is or tear up a wall. We definitely will take the lessons learned back on the parking lot and make maybe different choices on how much testing we do to determine what's there in the structural section.
Do we have other questions, comments? Thank you. Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. We did item 59 yesterday, I believe, in my crazy order. So we'll go to item 60 now. Chris?
Yes, Commissioners, item number 60 is an information item on the draft State Highway System Management Plan. The California Streets and Highway Code requires Caltrans to publish a 10-year State Highway System Management Plan as a part of the overall asset management implementation. A draft of the State Highway System Management Plan is required to be submitted to the Commission for comments by February 15th of each odd-number year. And as Luke pointed out in his presentation yesterday, it also goes to the RTPAs for their comment. So Commission staff will present a summary of the review and comments of the draft plan at the March Commission meeting. The Department is required to transmit the final State Highway System Management Plan to the Governor and Legislature by June 1st of each odd-numbered year. Michael Johnson from the Department will be presenting highlights from the report to the Commission today and going over the timeline of the next few months to get this to the Legislature on time with everybody's comments incorporated. Mike.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Commission. Undersecretary Director. My name is Mike Johnson. I'm the State Asset Management Engineer at Caltrans. I'm here to give you a briefing on the 2019 State Highway System Management Plan. This plan is important for this Commission for a couple of reasons. One, it's one of 9 components that we've put in place that really govern our asset management framework over the last few years. And this is a pretty critical one because it ultimately sets the mix of projects that are going to come before this Commission in the shop. It guides our future planning and programming within the shop. It is used to develop or to seed the development of our 10-year project book, which we are now publishing outside of the department for the construction industry, for consultants, for stakeholders to see what are we going to do in the shop for the next 10 years. It is that same project set that we're using to make predictions of performance in the future. In other words, how do we know we're going to get to these performance objectives that we've set out for ourselves? It's that set of work. In addition to a number of other aspects of the department, just earlier today you heard about the Advanced Mitigation Program. This 10-year project book is what is allowing that Advanced Mitigation Program to look out into the future to see where they might need to go buy mitigation for projects that are coming down the pipeline. So for all of these reasons, this is an important document for the Commission to take a look at. And today I'm just going to provide a brief overview of what's in it. For those of you that were here, saw this document in 2017. It was the first time we'd ever published it. Since 2017, it was pretty well received, and Assemblyman Frazier put forward and sponsored a change to the Streets and Highway Code that now make it a requirement in state law, as Chris noted. So what is in this? We do it in part to satisfy Streets and Highway Code 164.6, and this, as I mentioned, was amended by Assembly Bill 515, which was Assemblyman Frazier's bill. It also is necessary for us to hit a whole slew of federal asset management and performance management requirements. And then within the department, it really bridges between our state asset management plan and the operational aspects that we need in the shop in terms of specific projects, that these projects in aggregate are going to do the things we need to do to get to these goals we've established in these more strategic plans. So we're talking about a 10-year look ahead, if you will. It covers the period from July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2029. We kind of broke down in this slide what we refer to as kind of the first 5 years versus the last 5 years. The first 5 years comprise the 2018 shop, or 3 years of it anyway, plus the projects that are in our formal planning process, which will be coming to the Commission in the 2020 shop draft. So we call that the sort of our shop project pipeline. In other words, these are projects that the department has already invested time and resources into to bring forward. And we can look at those projects, and we have put in place software systems and tools that allow us to quantify what those projects are doing exactly. But that's not it. I mean, that's not the extent of it. We also have to look at what our highway maintenance program projects are doing, because the performance of the highway system is really a reflection of all work that goes on the highway system. But the two real big heavy hitters are what the shop's doing and what the maintenance program is doing. Beyond those first 5 years, then we get into starting to line up projects for our next planning work plan. So these would be projects that would be coming to the Commission in 2022. And this entire 10-year look is put forward in this plan, fiscally constrained, so that when we publish this project book, it is a fairly good representation of what's actually going to happen for the next 10 years on the state highway system. We have a number of components within the plan. It has a needs assessment that's required by law. This needs assessment is not constrained to the available budget. It is, however, constrained to the performance and condition targets established by this commission. We do that needs assessment. It results in a number that we say this is what it would take to get to all of the objective targets of the state highway system. And then we present a fiscally constrained investment plan, which is something less of the needs. We also produce performance predictions, which this commission saw in October and also last May, in terms of forecasting what the conditions of the state highway system will be for at least the 4 core assets going forward in a 10-year look. Okay, so our needs assessment really runs through a 5-step process. We look at what the inventory is today, or at the point we start the analysis. That changes over time quite a bit. The number of pavement lane miles change, the area of bridges is constantly changing, the number of culverts is growing, the number of traffic management system elements grows over time. So we have to first start with what do we have, what are we trying to maintain, and then what is the condition of those assets. And then we look at the commission adopted targets and we say, okay, here's what we've got and here's where we are today, and this is where we're trying to get. So how big is that gap between those two things? And then we estimate, based on current unit prices, how much we think it would cost to close those gaps. So that's the 5-step process. I've presented this on several occasions to the commission before. Graphically, you can see that we start with the inventory. We look at baseline condition. If we do nothing from the baseline condition, then the deterioration, the ongoing deterioration of the system will cause things to get worse generally. So that's what's represented here in sort of when you layer on that deterioration, where do you think you'll be? And then, so that's to the negative, and then to the positive is all of the projects that we're putting out to counteract and hopefully surpass that ongoing deterioration so we can see improved conditions. So it's somewhat represented by these different columns, and then ultimately we're trying to get to these targets that the commission established back in 2015. So we are still working on the plan, the draft as of today, and I'm comparing on the left the 2017 plan, which showed an $86 billion shop need for the entire state highway system, to where we are at the draft of the 2019 at $90 billion. These numbers for the 2019 are likely to change because we're working very hard to bring in new pavement information that was just captured within the last several months. So this analysis here was based on the prior set of data. We have some newer, better data. We're just trying to get it all together and get it in this updated plan. You've heard a lot in the workshops in the last couple months, and I think Mike just hit upon it again, the impact of cost escalation. I stole this slide from the workshop that we had down in Riverside. But these costs, that as they're escalating, these unit prices as they go up, the needs, in other words, the cost estimates that we come up with to close these performance gaps also grows. So as we're paying more, we update unit prices, that results in an additional need. As I mentioned, the plan also includes a fiscally constrained investment plan. So in 2017, that investment plan was $44.6 billion. That comes from the fund estimate, which covers a portion of it, which this commission adopts. But the plan, being a 10-year time horizon, has projections beyond the adopted fund estimate. So we work with Stephen and Clark and the budget group to come up with what those, what is a reasonable budget for us to work with going forward. There's a change from 2017 to 2019 primarily because of the cost indexing provisions in SB1 and the general nature of the revenues growing over time in SB1. So we have a little bit more money as we look at the 2019 future 10 years than we had in 2017. As far as a high-level breakdown, there's really not that much of a dramatic change from what we had in 2017. I think we're continuing to execute a very performance-driven plan. And for the most part, that performance-driven plan doesn't lend itself well or doesn't, we wouldn't expect wild swings from across a 2-year period when we have such long-range goals as those that we have for pavement and bridge condition, for example. I included this slide. I think this is let me walk you through it a bit. So in 2017, when we look at the future 10 years of investment, we had about 66% of the money was not in projects that are in design or in planning. So in other words, 34% of it, the department was actively working on progressing those projects. As we go to 2019, you see almost a complete flip-flop of that, where now we have over 61% of our next 10-year funds are already in design or formal planning, and we're only looking at 39% for that back 5 years. What does that mean? I mean, that means that our pipeline of projects in the shop is big. So we've lined up a lot of work. So as we're going out into future years, our available capital to line up more work is less than it was 2 years ago. Okay, that's a good news story. This is really showing that the department is progressing these projects through at a fairly significant rate. In fact, we have over $10 billion of additional projects in design and construction in terms of this 10-year investment from where we were 2 years ago. It's quite remarkable to see that kind of growth in a 2-year period. Ultimately, we're doing these projects to improve the condition of the highway system. We're monitoring that through performance goals. We have a couple sets of goals. We have the requirements of SB1, and then we have the asset management plan goals that were adopted by this commission. And we monitor both of these. We are making progress. We can see it in terms of projects that are in design and projects that are lining up behind that in a fiscally constrained program. So our confidence is high that these projects are going to get out the door, they're going to get funded, and the highway system is going to improve. In terms of our timeline for the plan, we started this work and the analysis, an incredible amount of analysis done by many, many people in Caltrans, started in April of 2018. So we've been at this for 10 months to bring this draft plan to you next month. The plan itself is about 250 pages. It includes incredible transparency in terms of the analysis, the deterioration rates we're using, the conditions of all assets on the system, the targets, what we're using for unit prices. It's all laid out there in an extremely transparent way. As Chris mentioned, we will be bringing a draft to the commission staff on February 15th. At that point, we will make the plan available external to Caltrans. It's still going through internal reviews right now. We will invite our MPOs and RTPAs to comment on the plan at that time. And then we'll take commission comments and RTPA comments and bring all that back together in March when we talk about this next. And again, ultimately, our plan, we hope to get commission blessing on the plan by May so that we can transmit it to the legislative members and governor by June 1st as required by law. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Do we have questions? I'm not hearing any, so thank you. And we'll look forward to more input. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move on to item 61, please. Robert?
Yes, good morning. Tab 61 is an information item on SB1 quarterly report and will be presented by Jim Davis. This item is returning from our December meeting at the request of the Commission, so staff had additional time to review. CTC staff worked closely with Caltrans' SB1 office and provided comments. Those comments were incorporated into the final report that was published for the December meeting. Caltrans is committed to pursuing a way to publish the report in a searchable and user-friendly format. CTC staff continues to work with Caltrans to discuss future improvements. We expect additional enhancements in the second report that will be published for the Commission's March meeting.
Jim.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jim Davis. I'm the SB1 Program Manager. Presented this report to last December meeting, and I'm here to answer any potential questions that you have on this report.
Okay, surely there's a question for Jim. I guess. Fantastic.
Are you going to do this type of report quarterly, or this, this is a lot to consume, obviously, but it's all the information I assume you're internally tracking. So is it your intent to do this extensive a report every quarter?
The answer is per the guidelines. That's what you've required of us, is to provide that report. I think there's some things that we need to do differently. One of the things Mike Keever talked to you about was the re-engineering of our reports. We've got overlap and redundancy between the project delivery report, this report, and the ATP report, and we're proposing some changes to that, and we'll work with Commission staff on that. I think, Commissioner, I think one of the things that we're looking at doing is actually putting all the project data online.
Bingo.
So that it's searchable.
The bulk of it is just the kind of almost like a spreadsheet type of the 8 pages at the front are really kind of the summarizing of what you're doing. So I think kind of a searchable database, which I know you're working on, is a great. Thanks.
And then we'll make that a Python report with a web address of where to go for the more details so you can search for the project information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Jim, I just think it was pretty clear to all of us that being good stewards of SB1 is, something that we're all very, very committed to. And obviously, Senator Bell and Assemblymember Frazier were very clear with that yesterday in terms of how important it is for all of us to be good stewards. So I think the work you're doing is very, very important. And I also would encourage you to make it as user-friendly as possible, because we can't forget that many of our partners don't speak our language, so to speak, of transportation. And so whatever we can do to really help it be, the Cliff Notes layman's understanding of how we're moving the needle, how we're doing here. So appreciate it and appreciate your good work. So thank you. Okay, no further comments. We'll move on to the next item, numbers 62, I believe. Lori?
Yes, Commissioners, item 62 is an information item. As stated in the SB1 Accountability and Transparency Guidelines and the ATP Guidelines, Caltrans is required to prepare a quarterly ATP progress report and submit it to the Commission. Like the SB1 report, this was brought at the December meeting and presented by Ray Zhang from the Department's Division of Local Assistance. And because the report was received with little time to review before the meeting, the Commission requested that the item come back at this meeting when the Commissioners and staff had more time for a thorough review. So I just had a couple comments on the report. Overall, it's a pretty good report, and it shows some good things, that particularly that the delivery in the ATP is very good. But there are some concerns shown in the report, and most significantly, the report shows that 37% of the completed projects show a decrease in usage from bicyclists, and 35% of the projects completed show a decrease in usage from walkers. It's counterintuitive that constructing an active transportation facility would cause people to walk and bike less. So we're hoping that that can be explained a little bit, and what can be done so we don't see those kinds of things in the future.
Okay, Ray.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ray Zhang, Caltrans Division Chief Local Assistance. Yeah, so last month I came to the Commission meeting prepared to finish the presentation on the Active Transportation Program Status Report. And yeah, so in the last few slides, I was going to touch on the point what we looked into and consider as some of the the explanation for the possibility for why some of the projects actually not showing benefit increase. I went through the same process when I was presented the result and say, hey, why some of these projects are not resulting in an increase? Because intuitively, you invest money in a project, you would expect that the outcome will be more than what was what was before the project was implemented. So some of the result that some of the analysis that was shown to me, and it started to as I was explained to you, is some of it was a counting methodology for some of the projects, right? So the benefit we used in counting for the bike project with the pedestrian sidewalk project is the count before and after the project. So the way some of the project, the count, the methodology is inconsistent. So that's one of the conclusions that we wanted to now work with the technical advisory committee and the project sponsors, and also working with the commission staff to establish a statewide standard counting methodology. So we have an accurate count, because without an accurate count methodology, I don't even know the one that's showing the increase are the one that's actually having the increase, or the one that's showing the decrease actually having the decrease. So I think that's kind of the baseline that we need to work with the commission staff, and also work with the sponsors and the advisory committees on that part. So that is, is very concerning to me and to us. The other part is we are looking at a very few projects that are being completed from cycle one. My experience with ATP program has been, we are learning. We're learning from, we just commissioned, just adapted cycle 4 project. And in this process, we learned a lot from previous cycles. So we adopted new applications, the new process. We are just seeing a few projects coming in for completion reports, and they are relatively small projects. And so whether that tipped the scale also. I think I have a feeling that I'm going to be in front of this podium and talking to the commissioners about the program for a while, because we're going to see more and more projects, and as we engage the partners in looking at the things that we can make improvements. So that's the other point I was going to make. And we also, when the legislature passed SB 99 to establish the ATP program, there were several primary goals. There is the goals to increase walking and biking, and there's also for safety improvement, improve the equity for disadvantaged communities. And also the reduction in greenhouse gas reduction. So some of these other goals we also need to be looking at. So we have, some project may exhibit different type of benefit, and this is something that we need to be working with the advocacy groups, and so we can come back and so make recommendations so the program can move in a direction that will really achieve the benefit for the program.
Okay, we have some questions from Commissioner Van Konynenberg.
On attachment C, the project watch list, I guess I was under the impression that some of these issues had been resolved. Are these still all open issues on attachment C, the project watch list?
Yeah, so I mean that was a snapshot at the time. So the
As of what time was this a snapshot?
This was so the report was at the end of October when we collected the last round of the progress report.
Okay. Maybe staff can correct me because I thought some of these issues were resolved prior to that, but maybe I'm too much repetitive brain injuries, maybe I'm forgetting. So maybe staff can clarify that. I'll defer to Commissioner Arp.
Commissioner Arp.
Given the increasing competition of these funds, it seems to me that getting the metrics right on this is critical because the end product isn't just building the project, it's seeing that it achieved the goals of increased usage and availability for the public. So I don't know the answer to that, but it seems to me that we need to get the counts right and figure out what you got to do to follow up and get good data because it will affect, to me, how we score projects down the road. And there are a lot of good projects that are not getting funded right now because there's a big lineup for projects. And so it could be that, if some of these projects they got funded and got built may not have been the best projects to fund as we look at it on the backside of it. So it seems to me that it's really important to get that down.
Yeah, I totally agree that to have a consistent counting methodology, it's important to know whether the project is successful. The other point I was also going to make is also the time it may take for a project to fully realize the benefit. So these numbers are reported after, within a year of the project completion. So, so some of the benefit may take a longer time to actually being realized. Something like the safety benefit, it takes 3 to 5 years to actually with the accident counts and but on the walking and biking counts, we need to work with we already working with SCAC. They have a region-wide counting database, and we're working with a contractor to expand that to a statewide counting database. So we are also through our Active Transportation Resource Center, we're purchasing counters that can be lent out to the local agencies to use for their counting for the project benefit.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? So I have some, staff, okay. Robert.
Yeah, so looking at attachment C, I think it's a point in time issue, so going through September. So when this comes back in March, like the city of Arbon will come off. We haven't received the final plan for the city of Compton. So I think it's really a point in time. So we expect a lot of these issues to be resolved on the next cycle.
Thank you.
But I also want to point out, so unfortunately because the timing of the report not being before cycle 4, we couldn't do things better. But staff we're watching the trends in this report, and we'll definitely make sure that we address the issue with methodology going forward and scoring. So I mean, we're taking that very serious, and We'll, work with our partners and staff and other stakeholders to make sure that we address that the next cycle and kind of build upon that and make sure that going forward it's not an issue again.
Okay, but I want to ask a question. Lori, your comment was, I think, 37% of the projects. Repeat that statement again. I'm not sure I really got it.
So in the completion reports, I think it was 37% of completed projects, which there aren't that many, show a decrease in bicycling, and I think it was 35% show a decrease in walking. And those are from the completion reports.
Okay, so percentages can be a challenge, sometimes go either way. But I think what's really, really important is that these projects deliver value to our communities in terms of mobility options. So I'm really concerned, and it gets to fool me once, shame on you, and fool me twice, shame on me. So I want to learn here. But as Commissioner Arp said, we're way oversubscribed, so we're turning folks away, and that hurts all of us, because Lori would love nothing more than to sign every project up that was a viable project. But I think it's going to be important for us to stay on top of this. Timeliness is important, so I realize we've come a long way. The first reports we saw, nobody was even reporting significantly, so at least we're getting some reports in. But I also want to know, is it a good project and our communities aren't doing enough outreach to make people aware that this is an option? I mean, what's wrong? So we need good information, and we need good timely information to make sure that these investments are good. I mean, that's our number one concern, and we have worked hard to get guidelines out that we believe accomplish the multiple goals that we have and balance them, but if we're not getting the outcomes, then something's wrong. So either we've got to know what's going on. So I think that timeliness is going to be very, very important here, and accurate information. If people count on a rainy day when no one could possibly ride their bike, Chicago yesterday probably wouldn't be a good day to do any counts. So I think if it's something like that, then somehow we've got to say to the folks, let's use some common sense. We need apples to apples. But those percentages, even though it's on a small base, are not one standard deviation, in my opinion. So we're going to learn from all of this, but we're only going to learn with good, timely information. And then we've got to make sure that the people who told us they were doing something really did it. So Arvin, I guess we've got that. What did we resolve on Arvin?
So Arvin is going to be working with the county, current county, to use their other funding source to complete the project that was originally scoped.
Okay, and do we have any others like that?
We had another case in the city of Compton. There were some of the scope were not constructed, so we're also working with that city and trying to partner them up with LA County too.
Okay, well, this is just very, very important. We've put way too much money into the program, effort, blood, sweat, equity, whatever you want to call it. And we know that our partners are very engaged, and they love this program, and we can't have a line out the door and then hear that the ones we thought were doing something didn't do that. So we're really counting on you, and we need it in a timely manner too, and it'll help all of us to get it well in advance. We like to publish these 2 weeks before our hearings too. So guess that's my closing comment. Any other comments?
Following this, Commissioner,
Okay.
I have a statement.
Yes.
I think we're...
Okay. Are we finished? Yeah.
You're finished with this item?
Okay. Yes.
Commissioners, I just need to do a time check here. It's a little before 11. We have some commissioners leaving at 11. We have another set of commissioners leaving at 11:15, at which time we will lose our quorum. And so my recommendation for you to consider is taking all the action items right now, and let's move through them and keep the dialogue as short as possible, only where there's critical questions that you have prior to the action. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so it looks like the next action item is item 64. Terry.
Commissioners, number 64 is an action item to approve baseline agreements for 6 SHOP projects. Staff has approved these agreements and finds that they're consistent with commission-adopted guidelines and recommends approval.
Second.
Oh, okay, so I had a move it from Commissioner Ben Kaneinenberg and a second by Commissioner Dunn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? I'm going back. I missed it. So this is 64. Sorry, guys. I had made a little mark on that one. So, okay. Let's vote on item 64. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. My crazy math. We'll now go to 63, which is an action.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item to consider the project scope change request for the Santa Ana River Trail reaches B and C in San Bernardino County. On October 23rd, 2018, San Bernardino County submitted a scope change request for the Santa Ana River Trail Phase 4 reaches B and C project to eliminate the Class 1 bike path on the south bank of the Santa Ana River and instead provide a buffered Class 2 bike path along surface streets that currently have a Class 3 bike designation. This is on Reach C. The county requested this change because the project's original alignment is located in an FAA airport safety zoning area for the Redlands Municipal Airport. The county believes that processing the FAA reviews for development within this particular zoning area would be time-consuming and that it is highly unlikely that it would be approved by the FAA. The department received the county request and submitted it to Commission staff as a minor scope change and recommended approval. After reviewing the request, Commission staff did not support Caltrans' assessment that the scope change is a minor. Commission staff further determined that the proposed scope change will significantly decrease the project benefits included in the project application at the time of programming, particularly when it comes to the safety benefits. Staff would like to commend the County of San Bernardino for working diligently to try to develop a scope that would provide the same or increased benefits from the originally submitted scope. However, it appears that this is not possible at this time and that the county should submit an application with a new scope at the next ATP cycle. Commission staff recommends denying the County of San Bernardino scope change request.
I have one speaker on this. Ben? Okay.
Good morning. Good morning to the Commissioners, Undersecretary, and the Director. My name is Beata Davis, and I'm the Director of Regional Parks for San Bernardino County. And we prepared a presentation to go over our scope change and the reasons and justification for it this morning. As you know, the Santa Ana River Trail is planned for 110 miles from the Pacific coast to the San Bernardino Mountains in San Bernardino County. We have completed 8 miles of trail, beginning with the border at Riverside County to Waterman Avenue in San Bernardino County. We have less than 15 miles to go to complete the trail, with less than 1.6 miles located, 1.6 miles in Phase 4. So the current alignment, as you can see here, is in the red area is in the runway protection zone. After some further discussion with our airports director, Mr. James Jenkins, who's been working with airports for over 20 years, and the director of the Redlands Airport, it was determined that not only is it in the runway protection zone, it also conflicts with approved future development that the airport has already had approved through the FAA. And because of that, they let us know based on their experience that our alignment would not be approved by the FAA. They also let us know that the FAA rarely approves non-aeronautical use provides non-aeronautical use releases within the airport or runway protection zone. The community benefits of the alternate alignment would provide trail users access to the Redland Sports Park. The sports park would provide a great place for trail users to stop, take a break, do other leisure activities, provide an opportunity to gather some water and just to rest. It also will provide access to local farm stands and other community destinations, and it would still be an integral part of the Santa Ana River Trail. It'll also provide continuity and keep the trail going from coast to crest. Okay, sorry, I'll have to just go on. It died up there on the screen. The obstacles, where are you going over there? So some of the concerns that were expressed were some of the safety concerns with the trail. The original we talked about the original alignment, but to help with the safety concerns with the new alignment, we would be placing delineators along the trail. We also would have an 8-foot bike lane with no parking, a 2-foot buffer for curbs, and a 3-foot buffer in addition to that. We would be changing it from the original Class 1 bike lane to a Class 2 bike lane, and we would increase the safety by adding the buffers that I've already discussed. If we are not funded, we would not be able if we are not approved for funding, the county's only foreseeable option would be to not build this portion of the Santa Ana River Trail because the current alignment is through the airport and the runway protection zone, and we know that it would not get approved based on our consultation with Mr. Jenkins. This reach of SART is a small portion of the overall SART Trail. A no-build scenario would discourage the community and visitors from using Santa Ana River Trail because the ultimate destination is the crest, is the San Bernardino Mountains. And the ultimate goal is for people to be able to go from coast to crest. I thank you for this opportunity to present before you, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions? Yes. Go ahead. I'll make the staff motion. Your motion to support staff, and that is to deny this. So what happens, or maybe I should have the motion in a second. So we have a motion, just so we're clear with what the motion is. Let's clarify, and then we'll ask a question.
The action is to deny or approve the scope change.
Okay. And so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Well, Commissioners,
Okay.
I want to clarify that. Staff is recommending denial of this requested scope change.
Yes.
Okay. And so we have a motion by Commissioner Kehoe, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Question on what that means to the project next. What happens next then, Lori?
So they have been allocated for their pre-construction funds. They have not been allocated for their construction funds. They have a time extension that is up, I think, in March. So we have a little bit of time to see if they can do something else, not a lot of time. But like I said, they can come in the next cycle and submit for this project.
Can I
Okay. So, any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just
Go
have
ahead.
a question. The alignment for Reach B, which was part of this application, has not changed. Would there be any consideration for funding through Reach B? Because I know the concerns were with Reach C.
Lori, do you want to address?
We could consider it. We'd have to look at it again, because then part of the project isn't being done at all, then.
So then the benefit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's so many projects that don't get funded in the ATP. It's difficult when one changes so significantly. It just doesn't seem fair.
Okay, well,
It's not, yeah, if I could just make a quick
Sure.
comment, since I made the motion, it's not that we're unsympathetic, we know there's a lot of challenges, but you know the program is so overprescribed. And when we let changes occur this late in the game, all the ones that did not successfully compete are disadvantaged. So, maybe working with staff in the next few weeks, something could be figured out, but I think the staff recommendation to deny the scope change is the right way to go in light of the entire program.
Okay. Thank you.
okay, so we're going to vote then. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries, so thank you. Now we will go on to, we're 65?
66. We're going to just take actions.
Oh, only action, okay. 66 is the next action. Okay, we got it. Matthew.
Commissioners, tab 66 is an action item to approve the State Route 99 Bond Program Project Baseline Agreement for the northbound Livingston Widening Project in Merced County. Staff has reviewed this baseline agreement and finds it consistent with proposition guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of 66.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Kehoe. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining? That motion carries. Next up is 68. Teresa?
Commissioners, items 68 and 69 are action items. These are Proposition 116, from the Proposition 160 program. 68 is a program amendment, 69 is the allocation. The program amendment will add the savings of two projects that were deleted earlier in the agenda. This is for the Orange County Laguna Niguel to San Juan Capistrano passing and siting project. Staff recommends programming the savings to this project under 68 and under 69, allocating the funds to the project. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, shall we do them one at a time, or are you good together?
Both could be done at the same time.
Okay, both
because-
can be done together. That motion was for both. So we have a motion by Van Konynenberg and a second, I think, came from Kehoe, Commissioner Kehoe. So any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Item 70.
Items 70 and 71 are also a program amendment for the Proposition 1B Intercity Rail Improvement Program. This is to program savings of $617,000 that were deprogrammed earlier in the agenda. The funds would go for the Van Nuys North Platform Project. And under 71, staff recommends you allocate these funds to the project. Staff recommends approval of 70 and 71.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Gometti, a second by Commissioner Von Konynenberg. So discussion. Hearing none, I'll call for the votes. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining? That motion carries. Next, we have Terry, item 72.
Item 72 is an action item to amend 14 new projects into the 2018 shop and make amendments to 20 existing projects. Staff recommends approval.
Whoa. Motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? But abstaining? That motion carries. Okay, now we're up. Chris.
Yes, item 73 is a department action item requesting amendment to the Major Damage Restoration Reserve for an additional $200 million, and that'll bring the total of the fund to $540,000. Currently, the fund's at $340,000, and shortening up my comments, I'd just like to let you know $285 million of that has been already in contracts. They have another 40 in contracts pending, so there's only $15 million left in this fund. They're requesting $200 million. I do have representatives of Caltrans, their maintenance here, if you need to ask any questions about that. Otherwise, Commission staff has reviewed this item and recommends Commission approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Arp, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Yes, Commissioner Gometti?
I have a quick question and hopefully a quick answer. Is the $200 million a wild guess, or is there some science behind why you need $200 million?
No, it is not a wild guess, and there is science behind that. We are already well over the average over a 10-year period of a month by month for this current fiscal year.
Wow,
We have residual damage from last winter's storms. We had the fire damage, and we have the damage that's come this year. Okay. It is an estimated, yes, but it is actually, okay, thanks.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining? We'll move on to item 74.
Commissioners, item 74 is an action item. This is a STIP amendment. This item was noticed at the December meeting as required per STIP guidelines. This is to segment the San Mateo US 101 Managed Lane project. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining? That motion carries. Go to item 76, Terry.
Commissioners, items 76, 77, and 78 are all allocations for SHOP projects. 76 is for minor projects. 77 is, there's 2 projects that were pulled, 7 and 10, so that remains 20 projects. Item number 78 is for, there's 1 revision, number 18 was pulled, so that leaves 69 pre-construction phases. So with that, I have reviewed all of these, and I would recommend your approval of all 3.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Item 79, Chris.
Yes, Commissioners, item number 79 is a department action item requesting approval of an allocation of $1,163,000 for 3 projects from the Phase 2 seismic retrofit program. These projects are environmental monitoring and mitigation measures to fulfill requirements of Coastal Commission permits for bridges constructed under the Phase 2 seismic retrofit program. Commission staff has reviewed this allocation request and recommends Commission approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Van Konynenberg. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Item 80, Teresa.
Yes, Commissioners, item 80 and 81 are STIP allocations. Staff has reviewed these allocations, finds them consistent with the program and the guidelines. Staff recommends approval of tab 80 and 81.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Arp. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? By abstaining, that motion carries. Item 82, Christine.
Commissioners, tab 82, 83, and 84 are action items to approve allocations for the local partnership, formulaic, and competitive program projects. Staff has reviewed the request, and the items are consistent with the local partnership guidelines, the adopted formulaic and competitive programs. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of tab 82, 83, and 84.
Had a motion by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. We now go, Christine, 85.
85 is an action item to approve advance allocations for 2 local partnership formulaic program projects programmed in fiscal year 2019-20. Staff has reviewed the request, and the item is consistent with the local partnership program guidelines and the adopted formulaic program. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of tab 85.
Have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Van Konynenberg. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Item 86, Teresa.
Item 86 is an action item. This is an allocation request for the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program. There's a change to this book item. Project number 2 has been withdrawn. Staff recommends the approval of project 1 and 3 for $500,000. Staff recommends your approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Arp. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Item 87, Anya.
Commissioners, this is an action item to approve allocations of $13,720,000 for 21 locally administered active transportation projects. The allocation requests are consistent with ATP guidelines, and staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Kenenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Item 88. Terry.
Commissioners, items 88, 89, 90, and 91 are time extension requests. There are a few minor changes noted on the change list. Staff recommends commission approval of the time extensions as shown on the table of staff recommendations.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Kehoe. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Okay, now we need to go to 91. No?
Do you want to take a
Excuse me? Do you want a little break? We got all the action items?
Yes.
I'm going to lose my quorum, but we're out of action items.
That was all of them.
Okay, okay, good. Thank you. That's it. We're in this. We're not leaving. So we got all of this. Wait, is Commissioner Arp leaving?
What?
Are you leaving? Or are you going to the restroom?
I have a plane to catch.
Okay, well, we're going to cry alligator tears up here, so what can we say? Keep in touch, and we love you. Okay, unless you all think we're going to let them just sneak out like that, stay tuned. You're going to get a little invitation to a little shindig of some kind to celebrate our commissioners that are telling us they don't want to sit next to us for a while. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, guys, and we'll retool and go back to the items that we